In a kidnapper's twisted choose one game, my parents chose my younger sister, and I was callously executed. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn into the body of a strange girl. She had a paralyzed grandmother and a disabled mother, living a life of poverty, yet she possessed the warmth I had always yearned for. One day, I encountered a crazed woman who asked if I had seen her daughter. I looked at that familiar face, stripped of its former elegance, leaving only a visage of hardship. I calmly shook my head. I haven't. Her daughter had died at the hands of kidnappers 5 years ago. A fate she had chosen herself. 1. In the dilapidated warehouse, my sister and I were bound by ropes, our mouths stuffed with rags. A camera was pointed directly at us, while the kidnappers behind us feasted on meat and guzzled alcohol, laughing boisterously. Linny Chang, have you decided which precious daughter you want to send to her death? My sister whimpered softly, trembling all over in fear, while I stared calmly at the monitor to the side. It clearly showed my parents' faces. The once refined and composed couple looked as if they had aged 10 years overnight, their faces filled with sorrow and exhaustion, their mouths constantly pleading. Don't hurt my daughters, please. We'll give you whatever money you want. Don't harm them. Please. The sound of a breaking bottle suddenly rang out behind me. I instinctively shielded my sister, and shards of glass flew across my face, quickly staining it with blood. Linny Chang, so you do beg me? When my company went bankrupt, and I begged you for help, did you pay me any attention? What's the use of money? Today, I want your daughter to be buried with me. I'll give you 3 minutes to consider. Save the older one or the younger one. If you don't choose after that time, then you both die. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of a countdown began in my ears. Every second that the pointer ticked was a death knell. My sister trembled even more violently. Her innocent eyes were filled with fear, and hot tears kept dripping onto my shoulder, scalding my eyes as well. Not long after the countdown began, I heard my mother's urgent voice, save the younger one. Please don't hurt my Aaron. As expected, I was abandoned. Although I knew this would be the result, a huge wave of sorrow welled up in my heart the moment I heard my parents' choice. My mom and dad, it seemed like they really didn't love me. At that moment, I felt as if all my strength had been drained away. I slumped to the ground, unable to hear anything, my vision blurring. The kidnapper dragged my sister to the other side, then walked back to me and tore the rag from my mouth. Kid, I'll give you a minute for your last words. The ticking of the countdown began again. My life was down to this final minute. My body began to tremble uncontrollably, my lips opening and closing but unable to utter a sound. The kidnapper urged me from behind, his voice seemingly coming from afar, even though he was close at hand. 20 seconds left. My hearing gradually returned, and the clamor of crying rushed in all at once, as if to pierce my eardrums. I looked at the monitor, trying to speak, but I couldn't make a sound. Only hot tears surged silently in my eyes. The next second, a cold dagger slit my throat, and I saw my own blood spurt out. I lay on the ground, watching my life gradually slip away. Like a weak candle flame, flickering and swaying, finally extinguished. 2. I seemed to fall into a long dream, and the past flashed before my eyes like a revolving lantern. My name was Lyra. Until I was 10, I always thought I had 2 mothers. One in reality, and one on the phone. Later, I learned that the one in reality was my aunt, and the one on the phone was my mother. When I was 3 years old, the family business ran into trouble. My parents were heavily in debt. They rushed around trying to make ends meet and had no time to take care of a child. To prevent me from suffering with them, I was sent to my aunt's house. My aunt was a very young woman. She was unmarried, had no children, and would brew a pot of coffee every day and sit by the window painting, doing so for the entire day. I was a light sleeper and often woke up from nightmares. My aunt would hold me in her arms, telling me stories to lull me back to sleep. She always smelled nice, and her voice was lovely. I always felt very secure when I slept next to her. My aunt was different from my mother. She loved to smile, wore makeup, and dressed me up. She loved buying me pretty little dresses, braiding my hair, and taking me out for cake. She said girls should be beautiful from a young age. Once, I had a high fever in the middle of the night and my whole body ached. I cried out for my mother in my sleep, and vaguely fell into soft, fragrant arms. Someone gently patted my back, coaxing me to sleep. When I opened my eyes again, my aunt was lying beside me, with dark circles under her eyes. After waking up, I hugged her and called her Mom. She was silent for a moment, then told me to call her aunt, and that the one who called me every week was my mom. I didn't understand. I had seen other kids' moms. They all coaxed their children to sleep like my aunt, took them to play, and dressed them up beautifully. But the mom who called me every week never came to see me, never took me to play, never coaxed me to sleep, and sometimes even forgot to call. I asked my aunt if she could be my mom, and the one who called could be my aunt. This time she was silent for even longer, then patted my head and said that the one who called would always be my mom, that she loved me very much, but she was very busy. I didn't understand those big words. I just thought my aunt didn't want to be my mom. I started crying and making a fuss. She had no choice but to tell me that I could call her mom when no one was around. I was very happy that my aunt was willing to be my mom. Like the moms of the other kids in kindergarten, she would always stand smiling outside the door waiting for me, rain or shine, whether she was free or busy, and then we would go home together. The other kids often complimented my mom for being very beautiful. I was very proud. I lived with my aunt like this until I was 7. One day, she suddenly told me that my mom had given birth to a younger sister, and that they would be taking me back soon. She was washing vegetables with her back to me, her tone light and cheerful, as if she was happy for me. She said that my parents' business had improved and the family was much better off, and that they could provide me with a better life. It took me a long time to realize who she was talking about. Mom hadn't called me in over 6 months. That was the first time I knew that I wouldn't be living here forever, that I had to leave. That night, I only ate a little bit of food. I asked her softly, "Can I eat less? Can you not send me back?" I didn't need a better life. It was good enough being with my aunt. I wasn't greedy. My aunt was stunned for a long time, not saying anything, only holding me in her arms with red eyes. In the days that followed, I worried every day about being sent away, unable to eat or sleep well. Later, I overheard my aunt on the phone saying that my sister was very young and that they might not be able to spare the energy to take care of me, hoping that my aunt could take care of me for a few more years. I was happy that I didn't have to be sent away. My aunt didn't say it, but I knew she was happy too. She even made 2 more dishes for dinner. But I forgot that I wasn't my aunt's child after all, and that I would eventually return to my parents. Life in my aunt's house was peaceful and comfortable. The days flowed by like the water used to wash vegetables, so the day of my return came so quickly. One day when I was 10 years old, I came home from school as usual and called out as I entered the door, "Mom, I'm home." But 2 voices answered me. That's when I realized that the mom on the phone had come too. 3. The atmosphere became awkward. Mom looked a little uncomfortable, and finally my aunt spoke up to ease the tension. I thought this child was calling me auntie. After dinner that day, Mom prepared to take me away. I refused to go, hugging my aunt and asking if she didn't want me anymore. My aunt had red eyes, her expression showing reluctance, sadness, and nervousness. She pulled at the corners of her mouth, trying to force a smile, but it was visibly strained. She pulled me away and pushed me to Mom. "Sister-in-law, don't mind her. Lyra just isn't used to it yet. She's just a child. She'll get close to you after you spend a few days with her. Lyra still misses you very much. She likes all the gifts you send, and she often dreams about you. It's getting late, you should go back early, be safe on the road." She seemed unable to see the pleading in my eyes, and still insisted on pushing me to Mom. When I left, I didn't take anything with me. Mom said that everything was prepared at home, and she took me to the car. My aunt stood outside the door until I couldn't see her in the rearview mirror. Even if they didn't say it, I knew I wouldn't see my aunt for a long time. I silently shed tears. Mom held me in her arms. Along the way, she tried to ease the tension, telling me a lot of things, saying that a princess room had been prepared for me at home, with many beautiful little dresses and lots of delicious food. I lowered my head and didn't speak. Slowly, she stopped talking, just sighing. Actually, I didn't hate her. I knew she was busy, but she would still make time to call me and send me many gifts from time to time. My aunt had told me many times that Mom and Dad didn't not love me, but they didn't want me to suffer with them because they loved me. Now that conditions had improved, they also wanted to take me back. I remembered all of this. But I just wished my aunt could be my mom. She was the one who had accompanied me through my growth. I had been living like this for so many years, why did they suddenly want to take me away? I couldn't find the answer. After a long drive, Mom took me to a very beautiful house, with a small garden, a swing set, and lights everywhere. It was much bigger and brighter than my aunt's house. She said this was my home from now on. I felt very unfamiliar, very restrained, and silently followed behind her. Until a little girl ran out of the house and threw herself into her arms, calling her Mom in a childish voice. I watched Mom's sharp eyebrows soften, and she squatted down in front of the little girl, patiently asking her what she had eaten today, listening to her say some meaningless things. I remembered when I used to go to kindergarten, my aunt would also hold my hand to pick me up, and I would skip and chirp, and my aunt would always listen with a smile and respond patiently. I looked at Mom and my sister hugging each other. Actually, I wasn't jealous or envious at all, but my heart still felt sore and uncomfortable. Maybe it was because they looked like a mother and daughter, and I looked like an outsider. And now I, this outsider, was going to join them and share a mom with her. My nose felt sore, but I didn't dare to cry. I could only tightly grip my clothes. I don't know how long I stood there, until my sister pointed at me and asked who I was, that Mom belatedly realized I was still behind her. She took my sister to me. Erin, quickly call her big sister. My sister's name was Erin. She was round and cute, and not shy at all. She looked at me for a while, then reached out and took my hand to lead me into the house. Sister, I'll take you to eat something yummy. Her steps were still a little unsteady. Mom followed behind, carefully protecting her, her eyes full of love. I suddenly wondered, had she ever looked at me with that kind of gaze? I couldn't find the answer. In my limited memory, I had only seen that kind of gaze in my aunt's eyes. On my first night back home, I went to bed early, and the soft blanket wrapped around me, giving me a sense of security. Later, Mom pushed open the door and came in. She said she was worried that I wouldn't be able to sleep well in a strange bed and wanted to sleep with me, but as soon as she sat down on the bed, my sister knocked on the door crying, saying she wanted to hear a story. Mom was very embarrassed, her eyes showing guilt and struggle. I very obediently let her go to be with my sister. She visibly breathed a sigh of relief and praised me for being sensible. I looked at her light-hearted face and silently lowered my eyes. Mom, it's not that I'm sensible, it's that I'm past the age where I need someone to sleep with me. I used to cry and demand to hear a story before I could fall asleep, but you weren't by my side then. And now, I don't need it anymore. After Mom left, I picked up my phone and wanted to call my aunt, but it kept showing a busy signal. I thought my aunt must be busy with something. I could wait for her to finish and then call her. I waited while listening to the laughter of Mom and my sister coming from next door, and fell asleep without realizing it. A week later, Dad came back from a business trip. He brought me and my sister each a dress as a gift. My sister's fit perfectly, but mine was too small, and the color wasn't what I liked. Dad was a little embarrassed. He apologized to me and said he would prepare a new one for me, but I just shook my head. Actually, it was easy to understand. My sister had grown up under his gaze from birth, and he clearly knew every stage of her growth and her preferences. But I was just a fleeting glimpse in a video, so what could he possibly know? To celebrate our family of 4 reuniting, Dad booked the entire restaurant. It was decorated like a fairy tale world. It was my first time seeing something like this, but it was commonplace for Erin. Before the meal, Mom meticulously reminded Erin about dietary restrictions, but ordered me a plate of shrimp. She didn't know I was allergic to seafood. Aunt had repeatedly reminded her for a long time when she picked me up that day, and even made a memo and sent it to her, but she didn't remember. Actually, I wasn't very sad. I knew she was very busy every day and it was hard to remember every little thing. I just suddenly missed Aunt a lot. Aunt never forgot my preferences. Every time we went out to eat, she would carefully remind me of what I couldn't eat. Just like Mom was to Erin, patient, meticulous, and gentle. After being taken back, I hadn't seen Aunt again. Dad said she had gone on a trip and didn't know when she would be back. He also told me not to bother Aunt often, and to find him and Mom if I had anything to say. I silently agreed, but I still couldn't help but call Aunt again and again. At first, it was a busy signal, and later it turned directly into a disconnected number. I knew Mom and Dad must not be letting her see me. They were worried that I would get too close to Aunt and wouldn't be close to them. That Mom I called Aunt that day seemed to have become a thorn in my parents' hearts. But they forgot that they had said they didn't have the energy to take care of me, so they sent me to Aunt's side. They were busy with work and never came to see me. Later, even the phone calls became perfunctory. Children are the easiest to coax, and they are also the best at distinguishing who they are close to. Mom and Dad, you were the ones who pushed me away first. I knew Mom and Dad were trying to repair our relationship. They were very good to me and provided me with very good material conditions. I transferred to a better private school. I had a driver to pick me up and drop me off every day. Clothes for each season were delivered to my house by a dedicated person. The nanny would make nutritious meals with different patterns. But we still couldn't get close. Just like Erin would fearlessly snuggle into Mom and Dad's arms to act spoiled, she would pester Mom to braid her hair, and would mischievously pull Dad's beard. Every time they made a mess, I would always sit upright on the side of the sofa. Erin was lively, mischievous, and quirky, often making Mom and Dad laugh out loud. When she was unhappy, she would throw a tantrum, throwing the dolls all over the room, waiting for us to coax her. Her emotions were always very clear. But I was always very silent, not having much to say. Most of the time, Mom and Dad would only care about how I was doing in school, whether I had enough pocket money, and whether there were any items I was lacking. The tone and expression were like caring for a guest. Actually, I really didn't mind very much. Any relationship is an accumulation of time, and there was very little interaction between me and my parents, so there was no talk of accumulation. But I would still feel a little sad in my heart. Probably because people have an instinctive yearning for blood relatives. Fortunately, Erin had a cheerful personality and we were very close. She always chirped around me calling me big sister, and she liked to follow me when the driver picked me up from school every day. Sometimes I would secretly take her to eat street food. Every time we walked to a stall, she would shout loudly, "Don't put seafood in it, my sister is allergic to seafood." She didn't understand that things that cost a few dollars wouldn't have seafood in them at all, but she remembered that I couldn't eat seafood. Because of Erin's existence, our family seemed to be harmonious. She was like a button, sewing me and Mom and Dad together. The rough stitches were hidden under her quirkiness. So, when Erin was trafficked at the age of 14, my relationship with Mom and Dad dropped to freezing point. 4. On New Year's Eve that year, when I was 14, Mom and Dad promised to take me and Erin to the river to set off fireworks. Erin had been looking forward to it all day, but was finally told by phone that there was temporary work at the company and they might not be able to come back. Erin cried and made a fuss at home, even going on a hunger strike. I thought about it. The place wasn't far away, just near the villa area, only a 10-minute drive away, so I asked the housekeeper to drive us there. I was very young at the time. I thought about many things simply and didn't think that there would be human traffickers at all. While the housekeeper went to the side to answer a phone call, Erin and I were knocked unconscious and taken away by human traffickers. When I opened my eyes again, we were locked in the back of a truck. In addition to me and Erin, there were many other children. Erin was young and hadn't seen the dangers of society. She was trembling with fear and could only hug me tightly. Actually, I was also afraid, but I couldn't be afraid. I felt around my body. Valuable items such as mobile phones had already been confiscated. While comforting Erin, I was planning how to run out. Now the car was parked under a remote bridge, still in the city, which was the easiest time to escape. Once the car drove away, it would be difficult to run. It was too obvious for two people to escape, and Erin was too young. One person couldn't escape at all, and I couldn't leave her and run away by myself. The best way was to find someone who could run out and call the police quickly. I looked around. Among the group of children, there was a boy about my age. Although his nose was bruised and his face was swollen, he looked quite clever. I moved next to him and asked him if he dared to run. I told him my plan. I took off my coat, loudly slammed the door and said I had diarrhea. When the person guarding us came to open the door, I used the clothes to cover his head, and then jumped around making a lot of noise. The children in the car all jumped out of the car and ran out, but the scene didn't last too long. I was quickly subdued, and the human traffickers' accomplices also came quickly. The fleeing children were all caught back one by one. The human traffickers counted the number of people and found that one was missing. As expected, I was beaten severely. Erin rushed up to protect me and I held her in my arms. My sister was so cute. It wouldn't be good if she was beaten badly. I didn't know how long I was beaten for. I only felt that there was no good place on my body. Erin was crying in my arms. I hugged her tightly and told her not to be afraid in a hoarse voice. The police had already been called. We would be rescued soon. Only I knew that the little boy had not run away at all. Although it was dark, this place was very open with no shelter. It would be easy to be caught if he ran. So, I had just created chaos to make the human traffickers run out to chase people, so that he could steal a mobile phone to call the police. Now that little boy was hiding under the car. 5. The human traffickers searched around but couldn't find him. They thought he had really run away, so they beat me again, and then discussed not waiting for the people behind them and setting off first. I listened intently, but gradually lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital with many tubes inserted in my body. I couldn't speak, but I heard Mom's heartbreaking cry. Later I learned that I had been beaten unconscious, my breath was weak, and the human traffickers thought I was dead, so they left me off the car, while Erin was still on the car. After the car drove away, the little boy carried me out and met the police who had come. We were sent to the hospital. I stayed in the intensive care unit for a long time, and then transferred from the intensive care unit to the general ward for a long time. During this period, Mom and Dad only came twice. In order to find Erin, they were visibly thinner. But even after I recovered from my injuries, Erin had not been found. Although the license plate number was added when calling the police, the human traffickers were very cunning and changed several cars on the way, making it difficult to track. No one knew where Erin had gone. After Erin was trafficked, Mom and Dad seemed to have been drained of their energy. They were very depressed and even the hair at their temples turned white. Dad numbed himself with work, often going on business trips for months, and Mom also started drinking frequently. But I knew that beneath the calm surface there were always churning waves. Finally, one day, Mom got drunk. The alcohol numbed some of her senses and tore open the surface to reveal hideous and terrifying fangs. That day, she smashed many things, crying and saying it was all my fault. If I hadn't insisted on taking Erin to set off fireworks, Erin wouldn't have been trafficked. She cried heartbreakingly, questioning why I wasn't the one who was trafficked. She asked if I was jealous of Aaron, if I had deliberately let Aaron be trafficked, otherwise why could I escape? I didn't know how to answer her, so I could only silently endure it. The next day, after sobering up, Mom cried and apologized to me again, saying it was drunken nonsense and told me not to take it to heart. But how could I forget? When you questioned me, the resentment and hatred in your eyes were so real. Mom, how could I tell you that I would rather have been the one who was trafficked? In this family, I and you are always separated by an invisible barrier. Only Erin was unreservedly kind to me. She would always save a portion of everything delicious and fun for me. She always remembered that I was allergic to seafood, unlike you who still often forgot. You are always very busy. Every night when she had nightmares or couldn't sleep, she liked to crawl into my bed. She liked to hug me and say that I was the best sister in the world. But I didn't protect her. If I had been the one who was trafficked in the first place, maybe you wouldn't be as sad and painful as you are now. 6. The search for Erin never stopped, but there was still no news. Occasionally, some unsubstantiated clues would send Mom and Dad flying over to confirm them, but they always returned empty-handed. I often saw Mom and Dad sitting in Erin's room crying. They would stroke Erin's photos with special pity, but I didn't know how to make them smile. I didn't have Erin's liveliness, her quirkiness. I couldn't make anyone happy, including myself. I could only study hard, always maintaining the top rank in the grade. I participated in many competitions and won many awards and certificates, although Mom and Dad never cared. I didn't know why I was doing this, but not letting Mom and Dad worry or be disappointed seemed to be the only thing I could do. I knew I couldn't replace Erin's position in their hearts, but I hoped they could be happy for a moment because of me. When I was in high school, a boy transferred to my class. I recognized him as the little boy who escaped that night. He said his name was Henry Carter. Without the bruises, Henry had a very beautiful face, which made him very popular at school. But he ignored everyone, just followed me. I knew he had recognized me too. Not long after, he moved into the villa area where my house was located and became my neighbor. And we became friends. On New Year's Eve when I was 15, Mom and Dad received new clues and flew to Seashore City, leaving me alone at home. Unexpectedly, Henry was also alone. He invited me to his house to stay up all night, made a whole table of dishes, and opened a bottle of wine. That night, Henry talked about his family for the first time. His father cheated, his mother died, and the mistress not only entered the house, but also designed him to be trafficked. If I hadn't helped him escape that night, his family wouldn't have looked for him like they were looking for my sister. That's when I realized that everyone can taste a different kind of bitterness in this life. Henry didn't even frown when he said these things. I wondered how many restless days and nights he had to go through before he could become so calm. If Erin was here at this time, she would have many ways to make the atmosphere easier, but I have always been very clumsy and couldn't say any comforting words, so I could only pick up my glass and clink it with him. That New Year's Eve, Henry and I sat side by side on the sofa, watching the boring Spring Festival gala. When the clock struck 12, Henry asked me if I had any New Year's wishes. I said softly, I hope Erin is found soon. He didn't speak, and sighed softly after a long time. She will be. Lyra, what happened to your sister is not your fault. You have tried your best. I didn't answer, just felt a soreness in my eyes. That was the first time someone had told me that I had tried my best. When I was 3 years old, Mom and Dad sent me to Aunt's house. I restrained myself and only dared to call her Mom in my dreams and when I was sick. At that time, I tried my best. When I was 10 years old, Mom and Dad took me away and didn't let me see Aunt again. I tried to adapt to the new environment and new family, and tried not to cause trouble. At that time, I tried my best. When I was 14, I didn't want to disappoint Erin and took her to set off fireworks. When I encountered trafficking, I tried my best to find a way to escape. When I was beaten, I also used my body to protect Erin. At that time, I tried my best. After Erin disappeared, I endured Mom and Dad's silent resentment and disappointment, while trying to study hard so that everyone wouldn't worry. I also tried my best. I tried my best in everything, but it always seemed like there was never a good ending. 7. After 3 years of searching and investigation, the human trafficking gang was uprooted, and Erin was finally found. I didn't know what she had experienced. She was so thin that she was just skin and bones. Not only did she forget all the things in the past, not remember us, but she also became a little silly, and one of her ears was deaf. Mom and Dad took her for a full-body examination. The doctor said that her silliness was caused by stimulation, and she could recover with good care. The ear injury could not be repaired and she would have to wear a hearing aid for the rest of her life. But fortunately, Erin came back alive. The worries on Mom and Dad's faces disappeared for the most part, and they began to actively accompany Erin for treatment. For the first month, Erin often screamed in the middle of the night. She would hug her head and hide in the closet, crying and shouting, "Don't hit me. Sister, Erin hurts so much, save me. It turned out that in every day and night that she was trafficked, she was hoping that her sister would save her. In those days when Mom and Dad were busy, the person she relied on most in her heart was me. But the person who caused her to be trafficked and become like this was also me. At that moment, I didn't dare to approach, I could only stand aside. Mom sat on the ground hugging her and crying with her. Her tearful eyes looked at me, filled with disappointment. That look seemed to be asking, "She trusts you so much, why didn't you protect her?" I fled back to my room. I sat there blankly, hating myself for being so useless, that I let my sister become like this. I didn't know how long I had been sitting there. A beam of light was reflected on the window. It was Henry using a flashlight to remind me to check my phone. This was our unique way of saying hello. I took out my phone and there was indeed a message inside. "Go to sleep early, we'll have a croissant sandwich for breakfast tomorrow morning." The two of us, wandering outside of our families, warmed each other in this way. 8. After Erin was found, her condition was very unstable. Sometimes she could remember Mom, and sometimes she was wary of everyone. She would often run out subconsciously, muttering about going home. The family hired many more nannies and maids, who took turns taking care of her 24 hours a day. Mom also resigned from the company and devoted herself to accompanying Erin for treatment. The doctor said that they could take Erin to do some things she had done before, which would help her recovery and recuperation. Like accompanying her to grow up again, Mom would take her to make desserts in the kitchen and read her stories every night to coax her to sleep. Many times they huddled together and whispered and laughed. I could only stand behind and watch. I saw that Mom was very tired, but her eyes were always bright, that was the light that belonged only to Erin. After being dim for 3 years, it lit up again. I should be happy, but why was there still a sour feeling in my heart? Later one day, Erin woke up from a nightmare and suddenly ran into my room and crawled into my bed. She hugged me and said, "Sister, Erin is scared." I didn't miss the fleeting stiff expression on Mom's face. That night Erin slept with me all night, and Mom sat in the living room all night. I didn't know if Mom had insomnia or didn't want to sleep, but I suddenly remembered her drunkenness that time. She questioned me whether I was jealous of Erin, whether I had deliberately let Erin be trafficked. So Mom was worried that I would secretly let Erin run away again? I forced myself not to think about it, but couldn't suppress the sadness in my heart. From then on, I tried to come home as late as possible every night. Every time I went back, Erin was already asleep. Henry probably knew about my family situation, but he didn't ask anything, just accompanied me running around the playground when I didn't want to go home. And then tell me what to eat tomorrow morning. If it weren't for Henry, I don't know if I could have survived that time. In the second semester of senior year, Mom told me that Erin's condition was unstable, and I was about to take the college entrance examination. In order not to disturb me, she and Dad decided to take Erin to Southern City to recuperate for a year. I knew it all. It wasn't really because they were afraid that Erin would disturb me, it was that my existence would always interfere with Erin. Because when I was at home, Erin always liked to huddle next to me. Even if she didn't remember me, she still liked me the same way, and Mom and Dad didn't want her to get too close to me. I didn't say anything, and silently agreed. I will never be chosen, I know that, and I can accept it. But that day Aunt suddenly came to my house. After 8 years, I saw Aunt again. She was still as beautiful and elegant as I remembered. She looked at me with moist eyes and said that I had grown taller and looked better. She brought many gifts for me and Erin, saying that she bought them when she was traveling around the world. When me and Erin unpacked the gifts, she and Mom and Dad went to the study. I heard them arguing. Is this how you are as parents? Erin is pitiful, but isn't Lyra your daughter too? You 3 are going to settle down in Southern City and leave Lyra alone here, can you bear it? It's fine if you're wary of me, but Lyra is your own daughter. How could she harm Erin? If you don't want to take care of her, then don't stop me from taking care of her. I looked down at the little bear in my hand, and suddenly a cold hand was on my face. Sister, why are you crying? Does it hurt somewhere? Erin will blow on it for you, it won't hurt after blowing on it. I raised my hand and touched my face, it was wet. I clearly didn't want to cry. What's there to cry about? I've grown up, I can take good care of myself, I'll eat when I'm hungry, I'll add clothes when I'm cold, even if Mom and Dad both go to Southern City, I won't have a bad life. But I forgot that people's hearts are made of flesh. When I see that I am always the one being left behind, my heart still hurts. That day Aunt argued with Mom and Dad in the study for a long time, and finally left with red eyes, and Mom and Dad still took Erin to Southern City the next day. I wasn't surprised by this result either. 9. Mom and Dad and Erin never came back once in the 6 months they were gone. Occasionally, I would see some of Mom's moments, photos of them taking Erin swimming, going to the amusement park, and doing various parent-child activities. That was a life I had never participated in. They would wear the same clothes, laugh happily at the camera, and Aaron's condition looked much better. I looked at the photos and secretly shed tears in the quilt. I knew Aaron had suffered a lot. I shouldn't compare myself, but I couldn't help but envy her. I had never had such a time with Mom and Dad. Even after I was taken back, they rarely went to parent-teacher conferences. They were always very busy, too busy to participate in my growth. But they always had endless patience for Aaron. They say that comparison is the thief of happiness, but how can I face it and resist comparing myself? Am I not their child? I sometimes wondered, if I had been the one who was trafficked in the first place, would Mom and Dad have looked for me so eagerly and persistently? Would they have accompanied me to grow up again? I kept telling myself that they would. But would they really? I don't know. 10. In my senior year of high school, I studied desperately and got a high score as I wished. When filling out my college application, I deliberately filled in schools that were very far away. I hardly ever went home on holidays, and I excused myself by saying that the journey was too far and too tiring. Mom and Dad didn't say much, and Henry would always stay to accompany me. Actually, whether I was at home or not didn't matter to Mom and Dad, and I had already figured it out. All feelings in the world don't need to be forced. Although I was born into the Lin family, I was too distantly related to them after all. In the future, we would each be well and wish each other from afar. I calmly accepted it and calmly distanced myself. But fate always likes to play with people in its hands. During my freshman winter break, me and Aaron were kidnapped. The kidnapper was a business competitor of Mom and Dad. He didn't want money, he had no other requirements, he just forced Mom and Dad to choose between me and Aaron. Aaron was very scared and kept crying, but I was very calm. From the moment the kidnapper made the request, I knew that I must be the one who would be abandoned. Actually, there was no need for them to choose, I would definitely protect Aaron. I had sworn that I wouldn't let her be hurt again. I looked at Mom and Dad's sorrowful pleas on the monitor, and even had a hint of happiness in my heart. At least looking at it this way, it would make me think that their sadness and pain was also a little bit because of me. The kidnapper gave them 3 minutes to consider. Before the time was up, Mom chose Aaron. She was so afraid that Aaron would be hurt again. I thought I would be calm to the end, but when the choice was spoken from Mom and Dad's mouths, I still couldn't control the sadness, which was a kind of sadness that flowed from the bone marrow. It turns out that accepting that I am not important is really so difficult. It turns out that to Mom and Dad, I am the one who can be abandoned without much thought. If that's the case, then why did you give birth to me in the first place? And why did you have to take me away from Aunt's side in the first place? Mom, am I not your child? Even if you can't give me as much love as you give Aaron, you aren't even willing to choose me for a second? I couldn't ask these questions, and my life had already come to an end. The moment my throat was slit open, I heard Mom's extremely painful scream. My eyes were full of tears, desperate but relieved. Mom, don't be sad, this time I protected Aaron, will you be happy? Will there be a moment that you feel sad for me? I really don't blame you, but being your daughter is really too tiring. You are the one who brought me into this world, and now you are the one who personally abandoned my life, which can be regarded as having a beginning and an end. In the next life, let's not meet again. I lay on the ground, warm blood spreading to my cheeks. I'm so tired, so tired. Let's take a nap. It will be fine once I fall asleep. There will be no more pain, and there will be no more sadness. In the moment before my eyes closed, I saw Erin struggling frantically. Her hands and feet were tied up, but she was still struggling to crawl towards me. I wanted to speak, but when I opened my mouth, all that came out was gushing blood. I couldn't make a sound, only my lips opened and closed. Erin, grow up well. Sister can't be with you anymore, you must grow up well. Darkness fell before my eyes, and I finally fell asleep. 11. Where do people go after they die? Heaven or hell? It seems like neither. I wandered aimlessly in a chaotic space. It was very dark around me, with only a faint light in the distance. I instinctively walked forward, wanting to grab that light, but I couldn't reach it no matter what. I kept running and running, but fell into a big pit. I woke up suddenly, but my eyes were blurred. Vaguely, there was a figure sitting in front of my bed. She wiped my sweat and gave me medicine. I wanted to speak, but my voice was hoarse. Mom, do you really not want me? This child is talking nonsense from the fever. The figure muttered and was about to get up and leave. I could only instinctively grab her, wanting to speak and wanting to keep her, but I couldn't make a sound in my throat, only tears kept flowing. She sat next to me again and gently wiped my tears with her hand. Why are you still crying, darling? It will be fine after taking the medicine. I swallowed the pill with difficulty, and then eagerly grabbed the corner of her clothes. Mom, don't go. With a sigh, I fell into a warm embrace, with a hint of laundry detergent scent. She gently patted my back and coaxed me to sleep in the gentlest tone. I snuggled tightly, holding the corner of her clothes tightly in both hands, like a drowning person grabbing a piece of driftwood. Mom, why haven't you ever hugged me like this before? Mom, you still love me, right? Mom, don't give up on me. I fell asleep again. This time I saw a girl. She waved at me with tears on her face. Please, help me take care of Mom and Grandma. I have to go. I wanted to speak, wanting to hold her, but I couldn't move no matter what, and I couldn't make a sound. The moment she disappeared, a large chunk of memories suddenly flooded into my mind. I suddenly realized that I was dead, but I was reborn. 12. Mom. I suddenly sat up from the bed, my chest rising and falling constantly, panting heavily. The pain of the sharp blade cutting my throat seemed to still remain on my skin. I raised my hand in shock and touched my throat. There were no wounds. I forgot again that I am no longer Lyra. This is the 7th day of my rebirth. I still haven't adapted to my new identity, and I still dream of the night of the kidnapping every night. After being killed, I thought I was dead, but my soul accidentally entered the body of a girl named Rosie Chen. She drowned trying to save someone in the water. The figure I saw waving at me was her soul about to dissipate. By mistake, I entered her body and got a second chance to live. It's just that there is a 5-year gap between me and Rosie. The details of being kidnapped and killed are things that happened the second before to me. But now it has been the 5th year since my death. I sat blankly for a while, calmed down my mind, and got out of bed to wash up. Because of the drowning, I had a high fever for several days. I took a week off from school, and it's time to go to school today. After tidying up, I took my school bag and prepared to go out. Grandma, I'm going to school. Rosie, wait a minute. Grandma called me into the room. Saying it's a room, it's actually just a curtain separating it from the living room. The only room with a door in the house is where I live. Mom and Grandma sleep behind this curtain. There are 3 people in the family, a disabled, lame mother, a grandma who has been paralyzed for many years, and me, a high school senior. All the income comes from a wonton stall, which is really not well off. Lifting the curtain, Grandma was sitting on the head of the bed, with a small table in front of her. She was kneading the dough and rolling out the wrappers. Mom had already gone to the market to buy groceries. I approached her, and Grandma wiped her hands, stuffed 2 eggs and 20 yuan into my hand, and straightened my school uniform. You just recovered from being sick, so you must keep warm and don't catch a cold again. You have heavy study tasks in senior year, so you must keep up with your nutrition and eat more meat at school during lunch. The autumn morning breeze was already a bit chilly, and I walked down the street with 2 warm eggs in my pocket, feeling warm all over. Although Rosie Chen's family was not wealthy, her mother and grandmother never mistreated her. They always gave her the best food and things to use. Especially after she entered senior year, they would occasionally give her pocket money so she could buy extra food for herself. Rosie Chen was very sensible. She knew that every penny in the family was hard-earned, so she never spent money randomly. From time to time, she would use the money she saved to buy things for her mother and grandmother. The family understood and supported each other in this way, living a poor but harmonious and warm life, which was the ordinary happiness that I had tried so hard to pursue but never obtained. 13. After arriving in the classroom, I flipped through Rosie Chen's textbooks. Fortunately, although the teaching materials and knowledge had been updated in the past 5 years, the overall changes were not many. As for me, I had only graduated for half a year, and I still remembered most of the important knowledge points. If I started working hard again from now on, it shouldn't be difficult to get into a key university. After school, I went to the bookstore at the back door, bought a few tutoring books, and then turned to the night market across the street. Rosie Chen's mother, Ruby Chen, sold wontons there. After school every day, Rosie Chen would go to help out, and then the 2 of them would go home together. When I arrived, Ruby Chen was sitting in front of the wonton stand, wrapping wontons. The boiling water in the pot next to her was bubbling, and the hazy water vapor made her eyebrows and eyes even gentler. I vaguely remembered the figure sitting by my bed when I was unconscious these past few days, just as thin and gentle. I called her softly, "Mom, I'm out of school." Ruby Chen raised her eyes and her eyes lit up for a moment when she saw me. She put down her work and took out a plate of small wontons and poured them into the pot. "Sit down and rest for a while. Mom saved you a bowl of shepherd's purse wontons, your favorite." I put down my school bag, neatly cleared the dining table, and wiped the table clean. "Are there many left unsold?" "There are only a few bowls left. We'll go home after we sell them." Ruby Chen held a bowl of steaming wontons and put them in front of me, then turned around and sat back in front of the stall to continue wrapping wontons. The light strip above her head shone on her thin back, casting a thin shadow on the ground. The heat in the bowl steamed upwards, and my eyes were also slightly moist. Ruby Chen smiled and looked back at me, her gentle eyebrows and eyes hidden behind the mist. "Eat quickly, it'll be cold in a while." I lowered my head and buried my face in the bowl, scooped a wonton with a small spoon, and put it in my mouth. It was hot, mixed with the fragrance of shepherd's purse and a little numbness from the white pepper powder. I swallowed it in one gulp, warming me from my stomach to my heart. I scooped up another one, put it in my mouth and chewed silently, savoring this feeling of being cherished. I ate a bowl of wontons cleanly, without even leaving the soup. Ruby-chan smiled and took away my bowl, saying that if my appetite improved, my body would recover quickly. After Ruby-chan and I got home, Grandma was already asleep. I went back to my room and started doing practice problems. Even if I was repeating senior year, I didn't dare to take chances. If I wanted to get good grades in the end, I couldn't relax for a moment. Not long after, someone knocked on the door. Ruby-chan came in with a basin of water, with a few Artemisia argy leaves floating on the surface. There was some worry in her eyes. Grandma said this morning that you had another nightmare. It's been several days in a row. How can you do it if you can't sleep well? While she was talking, she shook the Artemisia argy leaves with water beside my bed, and then touched my forehead with her fingers dipped in water. It's probably because you were frightened that day you fell into the water. We'll go to the temple to worship this weekend. I nodded obediently, okay. 14. On Saturday, Ruby-chan got up very early and took me to the foot of the mountain by car. The temple was built on the top of the mountain. There was no road or convenient passage. To worship, you could only climb the stairs step by step. Even so, there was a constant stream of pilgrims coming and going, only because this temple was very effective. Ruby-chan's legs and feet were not good, and she walked very slowly step by step. She held my hand, her forehead had fine sweat, but her expression was very light. The bodhisattva here is very effective. You must worship more later. One is to get rid of the recent nightmares, and the other is that the college entrance examination is coming soon, so we can ask for good grades. I responded softly, carefully helping her to walk slowly upwards. When we were still some distance from the temple, we heard the sound of chanting coming from the temple. After approaching, a young monk was waiting at the entrance of the temple. He said that there were dignitaries doing a salvation ceremony in the main hall, so he led us into the side hall. We worshipped the bodhisattva and donated some incense money. Just as we were about to go back, the abbot called Mom to speak, saying that she was destined to give her a divination stick today. I didn't have to go, so I waited in the courtyard. There was a plane tree in the courtyard, with lush branches and leaves, and a thick trunk, which looked a bit old. There were several branches on the tree hanging with red ropes. I walked closer. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, the leaves rustled, and in the sound of Sanskrit, I seemed to hear the crisp sound of wind chimes. I wanted to listen more carefully, but someone pulled me. What caught my eye was a face that was all too familiar, much older than it was 5 years ago, with none of its former elegance, leaving only a look of vicissitudes. Even her hair was a little messy. She grabbed me, her eyes a little out of focus, but her tone was earnest. Have you seen my daughter? At that moment, time and thoughts were pulled very far away, and the past 19 years floated and dissipated like smoke. I looked at her and vaguely heard the sound of wind chimes again, washing away my thoughts one by one. The plane tree leaves fell one by one, and my eyes became clearer and clearer. I gently shook off her hand and shook my head calmly, no. As soon as the words fell, she suddenly collapsed and fell to the ground, her whole body slumped down. Has anyone seen my daughter? She covered her face and cried out loud. I stood quietly in place, watching the red rope flutter up and down in the golden yellow plane tree leaves, but my heart was calm and unwavering. Her daughter wasn't here. Her daughter had already died at the hands of kidnappers 5 years ago. It was her own choice. 15. The chanting continued. Standing under the tree, I suddenly realized that today's salvation ceremony was being held for me. Was it hoping that I wouldn't hold grudges, or was it praying for a good afterlife for me? I didn't know. Can a person's soul really be redeemed? I didn't know either. I only knew that when a person dies, it's like a lamp going out. All the causes and effects of their life disappear with death, just like that faint blood relationship, which also disappeared with Lyra Lynn's life. From now on, there would be no hatred, no love, and no involvement. I looked away and turned to leave the courtyard. When Ruby-chan found me, I was squatting at the entrance of the temple memorizing vocabulary. Her eyes were bright and she held a yellow triangular bag in her hand, with red silk thread embroidered on it. The abbot said that if you wear this amulet, everything will go smoothly in the future. Ruby-chan carefully put the triangular bag into my pocket, as if she had completed a major task, her expression light. Let's go home, we won't set up the stall today, we'll fast for a day. When going down the mountain, I glanced in the direction of the main hall. 2 people were standing at the door, one was the abbot wearing a cassock, and the other was a young man. The man was tall and slender, wearing an elegant black suit, and a string of Buddhist beads on his left wrist. From my angle, I could only see his profile. He was lowering his head listening to the abbot. I had never seen him before, but I felt incredibly familiar, wanting to take a few more glances, but he quickly walked back into the hall. 16. Maybe that temple was really effective, or maybe the amulet Ruby-chan gave me could really calm people's hearts, or maybe the salvation ceremony performed by the Lin family worked. After returning that day, I really didn't have any more nightmares. The scene of being killed seemed to have really become a memory in a dream, distant and unreal, and I had become the real Rosie-chan. Getting up on time every day, making breakfast for Grandma while Ruby-chan got up early to buy groceries. After arriving at school, I buried myself in practice problems like every senior in high school. After the evening self-study, I went to pick up Ruby-chan to go home together, and then continued to read and write problems. Every late night of studying, Ruby-chan always warmed me a glass of milk at the right time, and then filled 2 hot water bottles, one on my feet and one in my arms. Ruby-chan wasn't well educated and couldn't understand the calculation symbols I wrote on the paper, but she would occasionally sit by my bed for a while and watch me write and do problems. She asked me, "Is senior year very hard?" I held a pen in my right hand and held a hot water bottle in my left hand. "It's a little hard, but I will try my best. Mom, I will get into a key university, and I will let you and Grandma live a good life." Ruby-chan's eyes were gentle and quiet. She urged me to drink the milk while it was hot, and smiled with relief. "As long as our family is together, safe and sound, every day is a good day. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, just do your best in everything, and seek to have a clear conscience." At that time, listening to Ruby-chan's gentle words, I only felt peaceful and calm in my heart. When I encountered many difficulties later, I would always remember Ruby-chan's expression and tone that day. I suddenly realized that everyone will encounter many unsolvable problems in their lives, and the understanding and support of family members can really give people a sense of confidence and peace from the bottom of their hearts, and face the future with equanimity. The days continued as usual. 1 week later, one morning, I was looking down and organizing my notes when the homeroom teacher led someone in from the door. "Everyone stop for a moment, let's welcome a new classmate together, Aaron Lin." The ballpoint pen suddenly stopped on the manuscript paper, smearing a small ink spot. I raised my eyes and looked at the podium. The reunion with the Lin family seemed to be so caught off guard. I never thought that I would see my sister again in such a situation. She had grown taller, and her once childish face had matured and become more refined. There was no longer any timidity in her eyes, but a bit more indifference. At this moment, 5 years became concrete in front of me. I suddenly realized that besides me, everyone else had moved forward for 5 years. Because I was the study committee member, the teacher arranged Aaron to sit on the empty seat next to me, and specifically told me to take good care of the new classmate. Aaron sat down next to me, bringing a gust of wind, and I smelled a faint scent of jasmine in the air, which was the scent of my favorite shower gel in the past, but Aaron didn't like it. 5 years is not long, nor is it short, enough for a person's preferences and temperament to change drastically. We are no longer the people we used to be. 17. As a transfer student, Aaron didn't have textbooks yet. I thought for a while and moved the book to the middle. "Let's read together." Aaron glanced at me, her expression cold and distant. She unceremoniously pushed the book back to my desk, then lay down and started sleeping. I looked at her back, didn't say anything, took back the book and started listening to the lecture carefully. During the break, I went to the restroom and unintentionally heard everyone talking about Erin, or rather, talking about her glorious deeds when she transferred schools. Let me tell you, stay away from that Erin Lin, she's a madman. My cousin used to be in the same school as her, and said that she fought with someone and cracked their head open. Her family was rich and smoothed things over before she transferred here. No way, she looks quite weak, and I saw her wearing a hearing aid in her ear, and I even sympathized with her. Who knows, the affairs of rich people, it's all about being trafficked and kidnapped. Didn't she just see her sister being killed by the kidnappers with her own eyes? Her mind must have been abnormal for a long time. Don't you know, outside they all say. I deliberately pushed open the cubicle door hard, and the outside voices were quiet for a moment. Damn, there's someone here, let's go somewhere else. Everyone left, and the surroundings became quiet again. I walked to the sink, and the mirror reflected Rosie Chen's beautiful face, with a pair of clear and bright eyes, showing no trace of Lyra Lin. When I returned to the classroom, Erin had already woken up and was staring out the window in a daze. She sat there like that all day, until the evening self-study was over and the classmates had left. She was still sitting there. After I finished the last question and packed my school bag, I still couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you going home?" She still didn't move or speak. I didn't want to meddle in other people's business, so I took my school bag and left. The school was very quiet, and the moonlight shone on the branches and leaves of the trees, reflecting a bright light. I had always known that the kidnapping was an accident, and I didn't have any resentment or dissatisfaction towards Erin. On the contrary, I was very happy to see how she had grown up now. Many things must have happened in these 5 years, and she had changed a lot, but I had no interest in knowing. I didn't intend to pry into her past, and I didn't want to participate in her future. The story about Lyra Lynn had been turned over, and I cherished this chance to start over. From now on, I just wanted to be a good Rosie Chen. 18. For 3 consecutive days after Erin transferred, she came to her seat early, but she didn't listen to the lectures or talk to anyone. I thought we would continue to be silent like this, but I didn't expect her to take the initiative to talk to me first. That day, the physics teacher put a problem on the blackboard, and I was the only one in the class who got it right. The teacher called me up to write the solution process. When I returned to my seat, I found that Erin had taken my exercise book to her desk. My habit of doing problems was to mark a certain special symbol next to the problem types and knowledge points of the same type, so that it would save time when reviewing later. It is difficult to change a person's habits, so it naturally continued to Rosie Chen's body. Erin stared at my exercise book and asked softly, "What do these symbols mean?" I reached out and took back the exercise book, and said in a natural tone, "I learned the problem organization method online. Do you want me to send you the link?" Erin was silent for a while, and shook her head. "Your handwriting is very similar to my sister's. It's very beautiful." My handwriting? The question paused, pretending to be a little surprised. "You have an older sister?" Erin turned her head to the window again, her voice as light as the wind. "Not anymore." The wind was blowing outside the window, and the gentle wind slowly blew into the classroom. I smelled that faint scent of jasmine again. I turned to look at her, wanting to say something else, but Erin directly took off the hearing aid from her left ear and lay down on the table. She was still facing away from me, silently rejecting all conversation. The Erin 5 years later was much more gloomy. I sighed lightly in my heart, and withdrew my gaze. Jane Zhang, who was in front of me, suddenly secretly handed me a note. "Don't talk to her. She is very difficult to deal with." I was a little confused, and wrote 2 question marks on the paper. Jane Zhang turned her head and winked at me, signaling me to shut up, and then turned back to write furiously. "The kidnapping case that shocked the country 5 years ago. Her sister was the one who was killed. Since then, she will go crazy as long as someone mentions her sister. Shut up quickly." Jane Zhang wrote very urgently. Her handwriting was a little messy, but I still saw clearly what she wrote at a glance. I looked at Erin again, stuffed the note into my pocket, and continued to listen to the lecture. When I went to the cafeteria for lunch, Jane Zhang pulled me to sit in a corner. She looked around, her eyes flashing with gossip. "Do you really not know Erin?" My hand holding the chopsticks paused, searching in Rosie Chen's memory. After confirming that Rosie Chen and Erin really had no intersection, I spoke hesitantly. "Should I know her?" Jane Zhang choked on my words and rolled her eyes. "I think you're almost obsessed with studying, right? There were news about the kidnapping case everywhere before. Didn't you watch it at all?" I picked up a piece of rice with my chopsticks and put it in my mouth. "You mean that?" "I've seen a little bit." Jane Zhang looked back again, acting like a thief. She whispered, "I heard it too, but don't tell anyone, okay? Some people outside say that she has a very hard life. Not only was she trafficked and able to be found, but she also killed her sister not long after she came back. It's very mysterious. In these 5 years, the Lin family's business has been getting worse every year. Everyone says that it's because her sister died miserably and her resentment is too heavy. The feud between the sisters has affected the family's fortune, so the Lin family salvation ceremony has never stopped in these 5 years. Although I think this statement is somewhat unreliable, and Erin is also very miserable, she is a victim of both trafficking and kidnapping, but it's really hard to say about this kind of thing related to metaphysics. Let's stay away." This topic was quickly revealed. Jane Zhang began to gossip with me about other topics. I listened absent-mindedly. After being reborn, I hadn't taken the initiative to learn about any previous information, and I didn't know these unfounded rumors outside. Recalling the changes in Erin, it turned out that everything had traces to follow. Since that brief conversation that day, Erin and I hadn't spoken again. Every time Jane Zhang turned her head to talk to me or ask for notes, she would unconsciously glance at Erin, saying, "Stay away," in her mouth, but her face was full of curiosity. Once, the two accidentally made eye contact. Erin snorted coldly and said, "Haven't you seen a deaf person?" Jane Zhang was so scared that she didn't dare to turn her head to talk to me all day. 19. The time in senior year passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was time for the monthly exam. This time, 3 schools took the joint exam together, and the students and exam rooms were arranged randomly. Jane Zhang was going to take the exam at First High School, and although Erin and I were in different exam rooms, we were still at Third High School. The day before the exam, Erin asked me to borrow my exercise book for the first time, saying that she wanted to take it home and read it. Jane Zhang was stunned. You don't listen to lectures or do problems every day. Do you understand? Erin raised her eyelids and glanced at her sideways, none of your business. Jane Zhang turned back honestly again. I took out the exercise book and handed it to Erin, and added, you can ask me if you don't understand. But of course Erin didn't ask, she took the exercise book and left. It gets dark quickly in November, plus it was a cloudy day. After the exam, it had already started to get dark. I was thinking of rushing over to help Ruby Chan set up the rain shelter, so I walked a little faster. It wasn't until I reached the school gate that I realized I hadn't taken my umbrella. I hurriedly turned back to get the umbrella. When I went downstairs, I suddenly heard someone talking at the corner on the second floor, and the tone wasn't kind. I originally wanted to detour from the other staircase, but I heard Erin's voice. Her voice was as cold as the harsh winter wind outside. What, do you also want your head to bloom? Then there was a man's voice, with full of mockery. Why are you putting on such an air now? Erin, with the Lin family's current status, who can you afford to offend? Mr. Carter can help you smooth things over once. Do you think he will take care of you every time? You don't know how much he hates your family, right? Erin's voice was calm. You'll know if you try, right? You. The man was momentarily annoyed, and then sneered, Erin, actually what my brother said is right, your sister died really unjustly. A good science champion, just exchanged for a cripple like you. Do you know what they say about you outside? They say you killed your sister, you are the murderer. What else do you have to be proud of? Along with Erin's voice, there was a crisp slap. Your cheap mouth doesn't deserve to mention my sister? 20. When I appeared at the staircase on the second floor, Erin was grabbing a boy's collar and smashing him against the wall. I yelled urgently to stop her, Erin. 2 gazes fell on me. I stood on the stairs, my eyes calmly swept across the boy's face, and then I said to Erin, the teacher is calling you to the office. Erin looked at me coldly, but still let go. The boy laughed twice, just you wait. After that person left, Erin looked at me. You really like to meddle in other people's business. I didn't care about her prickly tone and walked straight down the stairs. The study committee member just manages a little more. Please understand. It had already started to rain outside. I held the umbrella in my hand and looked at Erin, who had nothing in her hands. Do you want to sit down at my family stall? The wontons that my mom makes are very delicious. Erin didn't speak. I had prepared myself for her refusal, but I didn't expect her to agree. Let's go. The rain wasn't heavy. We walked slowly with one umbrella. I hesitated twice and still asked, did you really crack someone's head open? Erin's tone was light. He broke my pendant, and I cracked his head. Is there a problem? I didn't expect the bill to be calculated like this, and was choked for a moment. I didn't speak anymore. The lights in the night market had already been turned on early. Ruby Chen's rain shelter had also been set up with the help of the stall owners next to her. There weren't many people in the rain, and most of the seats behind Ruby Chen were empty. Seeing that I had brought a classmate, Ruby Chen greeted Erin warmly, asking her what kind of filling she liked to eat and if she had any taboos. Don't put seafood in it. My hand cleaning the table paused. I looked back at Erin, who was sitting at the small table, resting her head and not knowing what she was looking at. The warm yellow light shone on her body. Looking at her like this, she seemed to be less cold and distant. It was a bit like when I took her to eat roadside stalls near the school when she was a child. She also liked to look around like this, her eyes full of curiosity about new things. But the current Erin only had indifference and loneliness in her eyes. After the wontons were cooked, I picked them up and put them in front of her, pretending to ask casually, are you allergic to seafood? Erin stirred the wontons with her head lowered, and nodded lightly. I also recalled the faint jasmine scent on her body. I wanted to say something else, but it just so happened that Ruby Chen ran out of white pepper powder, so I went to the supermarket next door to buy a new pack. When I came back, Erin had already left. Ruby Chen stuffed me a 100 yuan bill, saying that Erin had left it just now. It's just a bowl of wontons. You give this money back to her tomorrow. You tell her to come often if she likes to eat it. I don't charge money. I knew that Erin would definitely not want this money back. What she lacked the most was money. I took the money from Ruby Chen, folded it twice, and put it back in her apron pocket. What's wrong with a bowl of wontons? That's also Grandma rolling out the wrappers one by one, and you wrapping them one by one. Besides, I have so many classmates. How can I not charge money to any of them? If you don't charge them, they won't dare to come next time. You can keep this money. I'll keep a good account, and deduct it from here the next time she comes. Ruby Chen couldn't persuade me, and repeatedly told me that I must keep a good account, and return the excess later. She washed her hands, put on gloves again, and continued to wrap wontons, chanting a few words with a smile. You child, I thought you only knew how to bury your head in reading, and I was afraid that you didn't have any friends at school. I didn't expect you to be so popular at school. It just so happens that it's your birthday next month. You bring them all to eat wontons. I was a little puzzled. What popular? Ruby-chan smiled and said, that's what your classmates said just now. She said that the teachers and classmates at school all like you, let you lead the reading, and also let you share your study methods. The classmates also like to borrow your notes. I'm going to tell Grandma when I get back, and let her be happy too. Ruby-chan turned back and hummed a song to wrap wontons. I squatted next to the water pipe to wash my hands. The cold water poured on the back of my hands, but I didn't realize it. Aaron's appearance of sitting by the small table in a daze involuntarily appeared in front of my eyes. In these 5 years, Aaron seemed to have changed, and seemed to have not changed. 21. Before going to bed, I took out my phone and searched for the news of the kidnapping case 5 years ago. This incident was very sensational at the time. After all, the Lin family's commercial territory was huge at that time, and it was one of the best in River City. However, everyone didn't know the inside story. They only knew that one of the Lin family's 2 daughters was killed by the kidnappers, and then the kidnappers committed suicide. Someone took the opportunity to spread the news, saying that the Lin family and his wife took the initiative to abandon a child, which led to the kidnappers killing the ticket. For a time, the Lin family's stock price plummeted. However, I don't know when, this statement was slowly suppressed. Instead, it was a metaphysical theory, that is, Aaron's life was too hard, and she killed another daughter. I suddenly remembered that in the corridor this afternoon, that boy said that Aaron was a murderer. I put down my phone, and the innocent and smiling face in my mind, and the cold and indifferent face now gradually overlapped. It turned out that there were no survivors in that kidnapping case 5 years ago. 22. On the day the results of the joint exam came out, the homeroom teacher was all smiles, saying that I had the highest total score in this exam and asked me to speak as an outstanding student at the flag-raising ceremony next Monday. In fact, Rosie Chen's grades were very good before, always in the top 50 in the grade, but math and physics were weaker, and these 2 subjects happened to be my strengths, so the progress in this exam was very obvious. Compared to my progress, Erin's grades were also very surprising. She usually didn't listen to lectures or do homework, but in the end, her total ranking in the exam was still 30 places ahead of Jane Zhang. Especially her English, her composition was close to full marks. Jane Zhang was so angry that she jumped up and asked her what cram school she attended. Erin didn't even look at the test paper, and threw it directly into the drawer, copied. Jane Zhang really believed it, and turned around to look around, and said in a low voice, "Can this be said?" Erin glanced at her and didn't speak anymore. Jane Zhang turned to ask me, "Did you also go to cram school? This progress is too great. I remember that we couldn't do the last big question in math before. When did you secretly become stronger behind my back?" I took Jane Zhang's math test paper and looked at it, and ticked a few wrong questions. These questions are all testing the same knowledge point. You will remember it and you won't make mistakes next time. I took out a few stapled A4 sheets of paper from my bag and handed them over. This is the key knowledge map that I sorted out before. You can refer to it. In fact, many places are not that you don't know, but the knowledge points are not connected. It will be clear after the outline is sorted out. Erin didn't know when she looked over, her expression moved slightly. Did you also learn this online? Sorting out mind maps was always my habit. I used to make corresponding mind maps for each subject and put them in the book. If Erin had ever looked through my previous textbooks, she shouldn't be unfamiliar. That's right, it's said to be a study guide from some top scorer. Have you seen it too? Erin lowered her eyes, as if talking to herself. Top scorer's guide. I also have one. I followed her words and asked, your sister was a top scorer in science, right? Erin glanced at me, with a hint of pride flashing in her eyes, and the corners of her lips unconsciously curled up slightly. Yes, my sister was a very amazing person. I smiled. Then you will be very amazing too. Erin's expression suddenly stiffened, and then she returned to that cold expression. She turned her head. I won't. 23. Since the classmates knew that I had organized the mind map, they all competed to borrow it to circulate, and finally the homeroom teacher took it to the office to print, one for each person. Jane Jing asked if she could spread it to others, saying that her cousin saw it last time and wanted it too, but she didn't know if I would mind if other people saw it. Although I was a little dumbfounded, I also gained some inspiration. That night, I registered a Shenyu account, put the mind map notes I organized on Shenyu for sale, and put up the test papers for this joint exam. I didn't expect anyone to buy it, and I sold 3 copies in one day. After deducting printing and shipping costs, I made a net profit of 200 yuan. Holding the money, I bought 2 new sleeve covers for Ruby Chen and a new backrest for Grandma. Ruby Chen was very happy holding the sleeve covers, and told me not to worry about the family's economy, saying that this wonton stall could support me to go to college, and not to have any pressure. I smiled and massaged her shoulders, saying that the notes were all organized and didn't take much effort, and she felt relieved. As a result, the next morning, Grandma called me over again, and asked if I was short of money recently and wanted to make money. She stuffed me a red banknote and told me to focus on studying. I explained it to her several times before she finally believed that I was not saving money on food and clothing. That day, I walked out of the house, and felt that the cold wind was also gentle, and that life had hope every day. Life continued peacefully. The first semester of senior year had come to an end, and my grades had stabilized in the first place in the grade, so I had been secretly thinking about doing a part-time job during the winter vacation. I wanted to save some money, and after graduation, I could take Ruby Chen and Grandma out for a walk. One day, I was sitting in my seat doing problems, when Erin came and told me that the night market area was going to be rebuilt, and that stalls would not be allowed in the future. She just told me during the day, and Ruby Chen was a little absent-minded in the evening. I thought that the news should have spread among the vendors, but Ruby Chen didn't tell me, so I pretended not to know. One night, I heard Ruby Chen talking to Grandma, discussing where to go in the future. The family's wonton stall was passed down from Grandma. They had never rented a shop before. They used to set up a stall on the side of the road, but there would often be urban management officers coming to drive people away. Ruby Chen's legs and feet were not good, and she was pushing a cart, which was very inconvenient. Later, she spent some money to find a stall in the night market. Even if the location was a bit behind, at least no one would drive her away, and it was close to my school. Now that the night market was not allowed to set up stalls, it was difficult to find a good place for a while. I listened for a while, went back to my room and took paper and pen, and then went to the place where Grandma and Ruby Chen slept. Seeing me come in, Grandma quickly stuffed the hot water bottle in her hand to me. "Why haven't you slept so late? You have to go to school tomorrow." I sat on the edge of the bed and asked Ruby Chen seriously, "Mom, should we consider renting a shop?" When Erin told me the news, I was thinking about renting a shop. If it was rented alone, the economic pressure would definitely be great, so I had to consider renting it together. Also, it couldn't be too far from my school, so that I could get there as soon as possible if something happened. So these days, I observed the shops near the school, and found that one shop was only open in the morning. It was an old couple selling buns, so I asked if I could rent with them together. They would do it in the morning, and we would do it at night, and the rent would be split evenly. They agreed. I took out my notebook and opened it, which contained the rent and the approximate monthly water and electricity expenses. Ruby Chen looked at the contents of my notebook, a little surprised and a little hesitant. "When did you learn about these things?" When I passed by in the morning, I just asked casually. "Mom, think about it, this shop is actually really good. I made a little money selling notes before, and I can pay the first month's rent and utilities. I can also go out and do a part-time job next month when the winter vacation comes. Although it costs more to have a shop, it's stable. You won't have to be exposed to the wind and rain outside in the future. I'm graduating soon. You don't have to think about saving a lot of money for me. I can apply for student loans in college, and I can also work and study." Grandma sighed, her eyes a little red. "Our Rosie has also grown up." Ruby Chen's voice was a little choked. "You child, didn't I tell you not to worry about these things?" I smiled and rubbed her shoulders. "Mom, I've grown up, you can tell me some things. Don't worry, as long as our family is together, life will always get better." Ruby Chen patted my back. "Okay, Mom knows." The lights were dim, Grandma leaned on the head of the bed, and Ruby Chen and I sat on the corner of the bed. A small piece of heaven and earth separated by a curtain was a place called home. Even though life can always taste all kinds of bitterness, only the love and companionship of family members is a good medicine. 24. After Ruby Chen agreed to rent the shop, I took the money and paid the deposit and the first month's rent first. In the first week of moving to the shop, everything went smoothly. I thought the business would be a little worse, but I didn't expect the business to be better after the night market was disbanded. On Tuesday, I invited Jane Zhang and Erin to eat wontons at the shop on Friday. Ruby Chen said that it was my birthday that day, and told me to invite my classmates to celebrate together. Jane Zhang was very happy. She was a person who liked to join in the fun, but Erin refused. Jane Zhang asked her why, but she didn't say, and only used something to do to prevaricate. Jane Zhang's enthusiasm was half dissipated. "You are too unkind, you won't go to your friend's birthday?" Erin was stunned, and retorted awkwardly, "Who are friends with you?" Jane Zhang looked at me and muttered in a low voice, "When the sky falls, there is your mouth to hold it up." Then she turned back angrily to do her problems. I looked at them, one awkward and one angry, and felt a little funny. After this period of time, Erin's words were slightly more, and sometimes when Jane Zhang and I spoke, she could add a few words, but her face was still as cold as ever. It was indeed beyond my expectation that Jane Zhang and Aaron could get along until now. At first, Jane Zhang was a little afraid of Aaron because of some rumors outside, but after seeing that I could communicate with Aaron normally, she would also find her to talk to her every now and then. At first, Aaron didn't pay much attention to her, but later she would slowly respond with a few words. Jane Zhang is a simple-minded person. She has no hostility towards Aaron. Later, she told me that she thought the rumors outside were unbelievable. Aaron was quite good except for her bad temper, cold eyes, poisonous mouth, and lonely personality. Later, during a PE class, Jane Zhang dropped out of the class because of her period during the collective running, and the boys in the class were laughing secretly. Aaron directly smashed a mineral water bottle over, and the boy immediately stopped talking. Since then, Jane Zhang unilaterally classified Aaron as a friend. In fact, there was nothing major, but everyone was a kind person. On my birthday, Aaron didn't come all day, and Jane Zhang believed that she really had something to do. It was also at that time that I suddenly remembered that Rosie Chen and Lyra Lin's birthdays were on the same day. In fact, I had only been Rosie Chen for more than 2 months, but these 2 months seemed to have covered Lyra Lin's 19 years. Those wounds that I thought I would never forget had gradually scabbed over under the smoothing of time and became a thing of the past. Maybe it's not time that smooths the wounds, it's love. After school, Jane Zhang and I went to the shop together. Ruby Chen specially reserved a table, and there was a birthday cake on it. I had told Ruby Chen not to buy a cake, and I thought she had bought it from me, until she brought the wontons and side dishes. I knew that the cake was sent by Aaron. That student who came to eat wontons last time, she said happy birthday to you. You tell her that it's okay if she has something to do today. She can come to eat next time. I still remember that your classmate doesn't eat seafood. Jane Zhang snorted lightly at the cake. What did I say? She has the hardest mouth all over her body. I glanced at the brand logo on the birthday cake. This was a store that we used to like to order for birthdays. In order to surprise Erin on her birthday, I once went through the back door to the operating table to DIY the cake for her. It's been a long time since I ate it. While I was in a daze, Jane Zhang had already lit the candles. She held the lighter and urged me to make a wish quickly. Ruby Chen looked at us, put down the work in her hands and walked over, singing a birthday song with Jane Zhang. I closed my eyes and made my first wish when I became Rosie Chen. 25. When I arrived in the classroom the next day, Erin was already there. I put down my school bag and thanked her. Thank you for the birthday cake, it was delicious. Erin turned her head. Oh, I just ordered it casually. That store only does high-end customization, and you need to book at least 2 days in advance, so Erin must have ordered it after I invited her. But I didn't expose it, just said that my mom asked her to come to the shop to eat wontons. You haven't been there since you ate it last time. My mom asked me if the wontons she made didn't suit your taste. Erin looked at me, then let's go today. When she turned around, I saw a thin red mark on her face, as if she had been scratched by something. I frowned and grabbed her face in a hurry. What happened to your face? It's nothing. Erin shook off my hand and turned her head again, refusing to communicate. She maintained that low-pressure state all day, and Jane Zhang didn't dare to provoke her when she saw her like that. After the evening self-study, I took Erin to Ruby Chen's shop. Ruby Chen greeted Erin enthusiastically when she saw her. Come in and sit down, it's warm inside. Still the same as last time, shepherd's purse wontons, no seafood? Erin was stunned for a moment, and nodded in a low voice, sitting in the innermost position. I knew she was in a bad mood today, so I didn't bother her, but when I went to deliver wontons, I saw her crying. What's wrong? Seeing me coming, Erin quickly covered her face with paper, and calmed down after a long time. I didn't speak, just sat across from her. Erin picked up the spoon and stirred the wontons. Her tone was full of sarcasm. I've only been here once, and your mom remembers that I don't eat seafood. Actually, it's not that hard to remember. I didn't know what she wanted to say, and listened silently. Actually, yesterday was also my sister's birthday. Because she passed away, my parents have always been afraid of this day. Yesterday, my mom suddenly remembered it, and said she wanted to celebrate my sister's birthday. She prepared a table of dishes by herself, but the main course was seafood. Erin smiled bitterly, but my sister is allergic to seafood. Strangers can remember it once, but she still hasn't remembered it after so many years. I lowered my eyes, not expecting Erin to tell me these things, and didn't know how to respond for a while. Erin wiped a tear. Didn't you ask me what happened to my face? Last night I smashed the dining table in the kitchen, and was splashed by broken porcelain pieces. In my shocked gaze, Erin's eyes were red. Sometimes I envy you, having very little, and also having a lot. If my sister and I were born in such an ordinary family, maybe everything would be different. 26. Erin buried her head and ate the wontons, using a whole pack of paper, and her eyes were swollen when she left. I didn't know how to tell her that in fact, after hearing these things, there were no more ripples in my heart. It didn't matter whether she remembered or not. I sent Erin to the intersection. She put on her hoodie and was about to leave when I called out to stop her. Erin, let me tell you a secret. Actually, I'm not my mom's biological daughter. Erin turned around to look at me, her dark eyes as cold as this winter. My grandma has no children, and picked up my mom when she was selling wontons on the side of the road. A ragged woman who was still a little unconscious, she couldn't say where she came from, and didn't remember her relatives. Grandma felt sorry for her, gave her a set of clean clothes, and let her eat wontons for free. She also knew how to repay her kindness, helping Grandma's stall to clean the tables and wash the dishes. Later, Grandma took her in, and the two lived together like this. One day after closing the stall, they passed a trash can and saw me, a thin blanket stuffed with a note, saying that she couldn't afford to raise me and hoped that kind people would adopt me. They were worried that I would freeze to death outside, so they picked me up and took me home. In Erin's surprised eyes, I continued calmly. Yes, it is said to be a study Bible of a top scorer. Have you seen it too? Erin lowered her eyes, as if talking to herself. Top scorer's Bible. I also have one. I followed her words and asked, your sister was a top scorer in science, right? Erin glanced at me, with a hint of pride flashing in her eyes, and the corners of her lips unconsciously curled up slightly. Yes, my sister is a very amazing person. I smiled, then you will be very amazing too. Erin's expression suddenly stiffened, and then she returned to that cold expression. She turned her head, I won't. 23. Since the classmates knew that I had organized the mind map, they all competed to borrow it to circulate, and finally the homeroom teacher took it to the office to print, one for each person. Jane Jing asked if she could spread it to others, saying that her cousin saw it last time and wanted it too, but she didn't know if I would mind if other people saw it. Although I was a little dumbfounded, I also gained some inspiration. That night, I registered a Shenyu account, put the mind map notes I organized on Shenyu for sale, and put up the test papers for this joint exam. I didn't expect anyone to buy it, and I sold 3 copies in one day. After deducting printing and shipping costs, I made a net profit of 200 yuan. Holding the money, I bought 2 new sleeve covers for Ruby Chen and a new backrest for Grandma. Ruby Chen was very happy holding the sleeve covers, and told me not to worry about the family's economy, saying that this wonton stall could support me to go to college, and not to have any pressure. I smiled and massaged her shoulders, saying that the notes were all organized and didn't take much effort, and she felt relieved. As a result, the next morning, Grandma called me over again, and asked if I was short of money recently and wanted to make money. She stuffed me a red banknote and told me to focus on studying. I explained it to her several times before she finally believed that I was not saving money on food and clothing. That day, I walked out of the house, and felt that the cold wind was also gentle, and that life had hope every day. Life continued peacefully. The first semester of senior year had come to an end, and my grades had stabilized in the first place in the grade, so I had been secretly thinking about doing a part-time job during the winter vacation. I wanted to save some money, and after graduation, I could take Ruby Chen and Grandma out for a walk. One day, I was sitting in my seat doing problems, when Erin came and told me that the night market area was going to be rebuilt, and that stalls would not be allowed in the future. She just told me during the day, and Ruby Chen was a little absent-minded in the evening. I thought that the news should have spread among the vendors, but Ruby Chen didn't tell me, so I pretended not to know. One night, I heard Ruby Chen talking to Grandma, discussing where to go in the future. The family's wonton stall was passed down from Grandma. They had never rented a shop before. They used to set up a stall on the side of the road, but there would often be urban management officers coming to drive people away. Ruby Chen's legs and feet were not good, and she was pushing a cart, which was very inconvenient. Later, she spent some money to find a stall in the night market. Even if the location was a bit behind, at least no one would drive her away, and it was close to my school. Now that the night market was not allowed to set up stalls, it was difficult to find a good place for a while. I listened for a while, went back to my room and took paper and pen, and then went to the place where Grandma and Ruby Chen slept. Seeing me come in, Grandma quickly stuffed the hot water bottle in her hand to me. Why haven't you slept so late? You have to go to school tomorrow. I sat on the edge of the bed and asked Ruby Chen seriously, Mom, should we consider renting a shop? When Erin told me the news, I was thinking about renting a shop. If it was rented alone, the economic pressure would definitely be great, so I had to consider renting it together. Also, it couldn't be too far from my school, so that I could get there as soon as possible if something happened. So these days, I observed the shops near the school, and found that one shop was only open in the morning. It was an old couple selling buns, so I asked if I could rent with them together. They would do it in the morning, and we would do it at night, and the rent would be split evenly. They agreed. I took out my notebook and opened it, which contained the rent and the approximate monthly water and electricity expenses. Ruby-chan looked at the contents of my notebook, a little surprised and a little hesitant. When did you learn about these things? When I passed by in the morning, I just asked casually. Mom, think about it, this shop is actually really good. I made a little money selling notes before, and I can pay the first month's rent and utilities. I can also go out and do a part-time job next month when the winter vacation comes. Although it costs more to have a shop, it's stable. You won't have to be exposed to the wind and rain outside in the future. I'm graduating soon. You don't have to think about saving a lot of money for me. I can apply for student loans in college, and I can also work and study. Grandma sighed, her eyes a little red. Our Rosie has also grown up. Ruby-chan's voice was a little choked. You child, didn't I tell you not to worry about these things? I smiled and rubbed her shoulders. Mom, I've grown up, you can tell me some things. Don't worry, as long as our family is together, life will always get better. Ruby-chan patted my back. Okay, Mom knows. The lights were dim, Grandma leaned on the head of the bed, and Ruby-chan and I sat on the corner of the bed. A small piece of heaven and earth separated by a curtain was a place called home. Even though life can always taste all kinds of bitterness, only the love and companionship of family members is a good medicine. 24. After Ruby-chan agreed to rent the shop, I took the money and paid the deposit and the first month's rent first. In the first week of moving to the shop, everything went smoothly. I thought the business would be a little worse, but I didn't expect the business to be better after the night market was disbanded. On Tuesday, I invited Jane Zhang and Aaron to eat wontons at the shop on Friday. Ruby-chan said that it was my birthday that day, and told me to invite my classmates to celebrate together. Jane Zhang was very happy. She was a person who liked to join in the fun, but Aaron refused. Jane Zhang asked her why, but she didn't say, and only used something to do to prevaricate. Jane Zhang's enthusiasm was half dissipated. You are too unkind, you won't go to your friend's birthday? Aaron was stunned, and retorted awkwardly, who are friends with you? Jane Zhang looked at me and muttered in a low voice, when the sky falls, there is your mouth to hold it up. Then she turned back angrily to do her problems. I looked at them, one awkward and one angry, and felt a little funny. After this period of time, Aaron's words were slightly more, and sometimes when Jane Zhang and I spoke, she could add a few words, but her face was still as cold as ever. It was indeed beyond my expectation that Jane Zhang and Aaron could get along until now. At first, Jane Zhang was a little afraid of Aaron because of some rumors outside, but after seeing that I could communicate with Aaron normally, she would also find her to talk to her every now and then. At first, Aaron didn't pay much attention to her, but later she would slowly respond with a few words. Jane Zhang is a simple-minded person. She has no hostility towards Aaron. Later, she told me that she thought the rumors outside were unbelievable. Aaron was quite good except for her bad temper, cold eyes, poisonous mouth, and lonely personality. Later, during a PE class, Jane Zhang dropped out of the class because of her period during the collective running, and the boys in the class were laughing secretly. Aaron directly smashed a mineral water bottle over, and the boy immediately stopped talking. Since then, Jane Zhang unilaterally classified Aaron as a friend. In fact, there was nothing major, but everyone was a kind person. On my birthday, Aaron didn't come all day, and Jane Zhang believed that she really had something to do. It was also at that time that I suddenly remembered that Rosie Chen and Lyra Lin's birthdays were on the same day. In fact, I had only been Rosie Chen for more than 2 months, but these 2 months seemed to have covered Lyra Lin's 19 years. Those wounds that I thought I would never forget had gradually scabbed over under the smoothing of time and became a thing of the past. Maybe it's not time that smooths the wounds, it's love. After school, Jane Zhang and I went to the shop together. Ruby-chan specially reserved a table, and there was a birthday cake on it. I had told Ruby-chan not to buy a cake, and I thought she had bought it from me, until she brought the wontons and side dishes. I knew that the cake was sent by Aaron. That student who came to eat wontons last time, she said happy birthday to you. You tell her that it's okay if she has something to do today. She can come to eat next time. I still remember that your classmate doesn't eat seafood. Jane Zhang snorted lightly at the cake. What did I say? She has the hardest mouth all over her body. I glanced at the brand logo on the birthday cake. This was a store that we used to like to order for birthdays. In order to surprise Erin on her birthday, I once went through the back door to the operating table to DIY the cake for her. It's been a long time since I ate it. While I was in a daze, Jane Zhang had already lit the candles. She held the lighter and urged me to make a wish quickly. Ruby-chan looked at us, put down the work in her hands and walked over, singing a birthday song with Jane Zhang. I closed my eyes and made my first wish when I became Rosie Chen. 25. When I arrived in the classroom the next day, Erin was already there. I put down my school bag and thanked her. Thank you for the birthday cake, it was delicious. Erin turned her head. Oh, I just ordered it casually. That store only does high-end customization, and you need to book at least 2 days in advance, so Erin must have ordered it after I invited her. But I didn't expose it, just said that my mom asked her to come to the shop to eat wontons. You haven't been there since you ate it last time. My mom asked me if the wontons she made didn't suit your taste. Erin looked at me, then let's go today. When she turned around, I saw a thin red mark on her face, as if she had been scratched by something. I frowned and grabbed her face in a hurry. What happened to your face? It's nothing. Erin shook off my hand and turned her head again, refusing to communicate. She maintained that low-pressure state all day, and Jianjing didn't dare to provoke her when she saw her like that. After the evening self-study, I took Erin to Ruby Chen's shop. Ruby Chen greeted Erin enthusiastically when she saw her. Come in and sit down, it's warm inside. Still the same as last time, shepherd's purse wontons, no seafood? Erin was stunned for a moment, and nodded in a low voice, sitting in the innermost position. I knew she was in a bad mood today, so I didn't bother her, but when I went to deliver wontons, I saw her crying. What's wrong? Seeing me coming, Erin quickly covered her face with paper, and calmed down after a long time. I didn't speak, just sat across from her. Erin picked up the spoon and stirred the wontons. Her tone was full of sarcasm. I've only been here once, and your mom remembers that I don't eat seafood. Actually, it's not that hard to remember. I didn't know what she wanted to say, and listened silently. Actually, yesterday was also my sister's birthday. Because she passed away, my parents have always been afraid of this day. Yesterday, my mom suddenly remembered it, and said she wanted to celebrate my sister's birthday. She prepared a table of dishes by herself, but the main course was seafood. Erin smiled bitterly, but my sister is allergic to seafood. Strangers can remember it once, but she still hasn't remembered it after so many years. I lowered my eyes, not expecting Erin to tell me these things, and didn't know how to respond for a while. Erin wiped a tear. Didn't you ask me what happened to my face? Last night I smashed the dining table in the kitchen, and was splashed by broken porcelain pieces. In my shocked gaze, Erin's eyes were red. Sometimes I envy you, having very little, and also having a lot. If my sister and I were born in such an ordinary family, maybe everything would be different. 26. Erin buried her head and ate the wontons, using a whole pack of paper, and her eyes were swollen when she left. I didn't know how to tell her that in fact, after hearing these things, there were no more ripples in my heart. It didn't matter whether she remembered or not. I sent Erin to the intersection. She put on her hoodie and was about to leave when I called out to stop her. Erin, let me tell you a secret. Actually, I'm not my mom's biological daughter. Erin turned around to look at me, her dark eyes as cold as this winter. My grandma has no children, and picked up my mom when she was selling wontons on the side of the road. A ragged woman who was still a little unconscious. She couldn't say where she came from, and didn't remember her relatives. Grandma felt sorry for her, gave her a set of clean clothes, and let her eat wontons for free. She also knew how to repay her kindness, helping Grandma's stall to clean the tables and wash the dishes. Later, Grandma took her in, and the two lived together like this. One day after closing the stall, they passed a trash can and saw me, a thin blanket stuffed with a note, saying that she couldn't afford to raise me and hoped that kind people would adopt me. They were worried that I would freeze to death outside, so they picked me up and took me home. In Erin's surprised eyes, I continued calmly. I couldn't care about any pretense, dropped my pen and ran outside. When I got to the hospital, Ruby Chen was sitting outside the operating room, still wearing her apron. Mom, what did the doctor say? Seeing me come, Ruby Chen held my hand and trembled nonstop, finally crying out loud. The doctor said Grandma had bleeding in the right brain, which required emergency surgery, and asked us to go and pay the fees quickly. Ruby Chen's personality is soft, and she seemed a little at a loss when she encountered such a sudden event. I was just thinking about going home to get the card when Erin walked over. She handed me a card. Use this first. I didn't know when she came, and was stunned for a moment looking at the card. Erin thought I didn't want to take it, and directly stuffed it over. The opportunity to exchange money for relatives is not something everyone has. I have the most money. You can pay me back slowly. Erin finished speaking and left. I didn't have time to hesitate, and took the card to pay the fees. Fortunately, the surgery went smoothly. The doctor said that the bleeding point happened to be the place that pressed on the nerves last time. If the prognosis was smooth, Grandma's paralysis might be improved through rehabilitation. That was a piece of good news. During the period that Grandma was hospitalized, the wonton shop was temporarily closed, and Ruby Chen was taking care of her in the hospital. I would go once every other day. Jianjing knew about my family situation, and brought me food every day. She excused herself by saying that her family made too much and couldn't finish it, but I knew she was taking care of my self-esteem. I didn't refuse, but helped her as much as I could in studying. 34. On the day of the college entrance examination, the sun was very bright, shining on the leaves and reflecting a bright light. I sat on the bench in the school for a while, and suddenly felt unreal. It had been almost a year since I became Rosie Chen. This year, I returned to the senior high school classroom, and time passed quickly between the strokes of the pen. This year, I had a new family, made new friends, and started another kind of life. I used to think that blood relatives would be higher than all fetters, but later I learned that the real emotional connection only needs sincerity in exchange for sincerity. After the college entrance examination, I bought a bouquet of lilies and went to the Liming Cemetery alone. That day, the sun was clear and the wind was gentle. Aunt was still smiling at me. I squatted down and told her that I was fine and that I would live a good new life in the future. Erin left River City and started her graduation trip. Occasionally, Jane Zhang and I could receive postcards from her from different places. Each time, the postmark had 2 names. Now, she was always moving forward with 2 lives. Jane Zhang was tutoring her brother in English at home to earn extra money, and she could complain 800 times every time we met. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. 35. On the day the college entrance examination scores were released, I became the top science student in River City again. Ruby Chen wiped away her tears with a smile and said she would take me to the temple to fulfill my wish, but that day there was no one under the plane tree. Grandma's surgery had a good prognosis, and she was already receiving rehabilitation treatment. Although it was difficult to move, at least she could stand for a short time. Everything was going smoothly. I had a lot of time in the summer vacation, so I found a part-time job, working in a book cafe. Because the job responsibilities had bilingual requirements, the salary was a little higher. My first day at work was in an afternoon when the sun was at its peak. I lowered my head and fiddled with the coffee machine. The wind chimes outside the door rang, welcoming my first guest. That person was tall and had long legs, his white shirt neatly tucked into his suit pants, and his sleeves were rolled up a few times, revealing the Buddhist beads on his left wrist. I put down what I was doing and showed a smile. Welcome. And a full text. Extra, Aaron's extra. When I was 12 years old, my sister and I were kidnapped. The kidnappers asked my parents to choose one of us, and only one of me and my sister could live. As the lucky one, I was chosen to live. The kidnapper did what he said, and my sister was slit in the throat on the spot, and fell to the ground covered in blood. She looked in my direction, her eyes full of tears, her lips opened and closed, but she didn't make a sound, only blood spurted. Perhaps the scene was too tragic, or it was too familiar. The memories sealed in the depths of my brain suddenly broke through the shackles and gathered in my mind like a tide. Those memories that were lost due to dementia poured in unexpectedly. It turned out that this was the second time that my sister fell in front of me covered in blood. It was also the second time that she protected me with her life. I still remember that when I was 7 years old, she protected me in her arms, and took the kidnappers' punches and kicks with her body. When she was thrown out of the car, her whole body was as soft as a lump of cotton. Later, countless nights, I would repeatedly think about why my life always had to be exchanged for my sister's. What did I rely on? Looking back on the brief moments we had together, I never brought her anything good, but all her suffering came from me. From the moment I was born, I was invisibly plundering everything that belonged to her. The love of my parents, the companionship on the road to growth, and countless times of acting spoiled with my parents, everything she lacked was nourishing me. But I didn't understand. Not understanding but possessing, what a lucky sin. Usually people like us have another name, called beneficiaries. And beneficiaries have no one to resent. Just like I hate that I was the one who survived, but I can never blame my parents' choice. I already knew about my sister's hardships, but I could never truly empathize with everything she had experienced. Thinking about it, it turned out that I was the sin itself. If I hadn't been born in the first place, my sister's situation in the family might have been completely different. If I could have been more sensible and not insisted on setting off fireworks, we wouldn't have encountered trafficking, and my sister wouldn't have to bear the consequences of my being trafficked. Or maybe if I hadn't been found back then, maybe with the fading of time, she would eventually be able to repair her relationship with her parents. But life doesn't have so many ifs. I will never forget that day my sister fell on the cold ground, and when I crawled over, my body was covered in blood, and I couldn't wash it clean no matter how hard I tried. Just like my life, it has always been covered in my sister's blood. And I don't even have the right to choose death. After my sister died, my mother slowly began to have some mental disorders, often crying and laughing unconsciously, and sometimes she would mistake me. She knelt in front of me, crying and saying sorry. My father's hair turned white overnight, but he still had to support the company, and his clear eyes never had light again, leaving only old age and turbidity. This family was still there, but it was also scattered. My sister's life was pressing on us, and no one could bear it. Sometimes I think the adult world is also quite absurd. They only start to regret after losing it. What's the use? I don't understand. I can only watch them suffer coldly, drifting like a bystander. I can no longer be close to my parents, and I can't reconcile with myself. I can only force myself to remember everything about my sister. My sister likes jasmine-scented shower gel, likes light green clothes, likes to watch comedy movies, likes to eat street food, doesn't like to eat Western food, doesn't like to take pictures, and can't eat seafood. I repeatedly read the books she had read, and the textbooks and exercise books she had used. These imprints of my sister's life, I forced myself to imprint on my body, which is the shackle I gave myself. Other people's pain can be diluted and smoothed by time, but I will never have the right to forget my sister. One person who can't forget my sister like me is Henry Carter. I found out later that he was the one who was trafficked with us back then, and finally escaped with the help of my sister. He was also the only one who accompanied my sister when she was the most painful and helpless. He likes my sister. After my sister died, Henry Carter went abroad. When he came back, he took over Carter Group in full and became Mr. Carter, whom everyone in River City flattered. He appeared high above, in a condescending manner. When the Lynn family was at its most difficult, my father begged him, and drank until he had a stomach hemorrhage at the dinner. At that time, Henry Carter sat upright in the main seat, playing with the Buddhist beads in his hand with boredom. His voice was cold. President Lynn, have you experienced real despair? The despair of being abandoned by your parents and just waiting to die. You did so many salvation ceremonies for her. Do you want to drive away her resentment, or do you sincerely hope that she will have a good afterlife? At least don't meet parents like you again. People in the business world are used to following the wind, and no one dared to lend a helping hand. The Lynn family was on the verge of bankruptcy. At the last moment, Henry Carter pulled again, on the condition that my parents were not allowed to see my sister again. After my sister was cremated, my mother hugged the ashes and refused to bury them, so she kept them in the room. Later, Henry Carter took away my sister's ashes and buried them under a plane tree in the temple. It was very quiet there, with chanting, flowers, insects, and gentle breezes every day. Every month, Henry Carter would stay in the temple for a week, eating vegetarian food, copying scriptures, and asking for a smooth and peaceful afterlife for my sister. I had seen Henry Carter a few times. His left wrist was always wearing a string of Buddhist beads, and from a distance, he was indifferent and unlike people in this world. But every time he stood under that plane tree, his eyebrows were always clear and bright, like the gentle breeze and drizzle in April. Everyone thought that Henry Carter was indifferent by nature, without desires and emotions, but only I knew that it wasn't that there was no one who could make him smile, it was just that that person was no longer there. I spent 5 years in a daze. When I was a senior in high school, a boy confessed to me. I didn't agree, and he started to gather classmates to bully me. I had heard a lot of those rumors outside, and I didn't care at all, letting them spread with embellishments. But he shouldn't have broken my pendant. That pendant was made by my sister when she took me to do pottery, and she strung it by hand and gave it to me. There were not many things left at home that belonged to my sister. After Henry Carter took away the ashes, my father asked the nanny to empty my sister's room, and all the things were packed up and burned. He sat in the chair, his back no longer tall and straight, just saying in a deep voice that the living should always look forward. He took care of everything while I was not at home, and was planning to immigrate again. There were so few things that belonged to my sister, and when I came back, there was only a handful of ashes left. Except for the book that I had already taken into the room, the pendant was my last thought. It was broken by him like that. What should I use to pay? I thought about it for a long time, and decided to use his life to pay. I went crazy and fought with him, and finally he was sent to the hospital with blood on his head, and I went to the police station. With the Lynn family's current status, they can't save me, but I'm not nervous at all. For me, death and life are just the difference between closing my eyes and opening my eyes. But I didn't expect Henry Carter to come to pick me up. He stood in the rain with an umbrella, and behind him was an endless blackness. He opened his mouth softly, his voice wet with the rain. Let's go home. Because of Henry Carter's intervention, the matter was quickly settled, and I rested at home for a week. Then Henry Carter notified us that he would hold a final salvation ceremony for my sister again. The abbot said that relatives needed to pull the red cloth, so my parents could go. That day in the mountains, Henry Carter told me that he had arranged for me to transfer to a school. I asked him why he wanted to take care of me. He didn't look at me, his eyes fell on the plane tree, lingering and long. You are Jiajia's only relative. At that moment, I suddenly felt very tired. Why, in the 5th year after my sister's death, was I still enjoying the preferential treatment related to her? What an unbearable person I should be. There is no answer. Everyone says that the dead will give dreams, but my sister never wants to enter my dream, and I have nowhere to ask. After transferring schools, I thought I would continue to live a stagnant life. But I met someone who was very similar to my sister. The way she spoke, her habits, her eyes, and her feeling were so similar. Sometimes I would hallucinate that she was my sister, or that my sister's soul was in her, but I knew that was all wishful thinking. How can the dead come back to life? But I still couldn't help but get close to her. Every time I was with her, I would always subconsciously think of my sister, and I would always say to her those words that no one could listen to in the depths of my heart. It was like affirming that she would definitely listen, definitely understand, and definitely respond. Once I asked her, "Do you believe that the dead will come back?" She was holding a pen and calculating on the manuscript paper by herself. "I believe more that the living must move forward with two lives." The breeze brushed her hair, she reached out and pulled it behind her ear, bringing a faint scent of jasmine, and when she looked up at me, there was a shallow dimple at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were like a gentle breeze. At that moment, I was stunned and forgot to breathe. I never thought that I would grow back flesh and blood in the eyes of a stranger who was like my sister but not my sister. I think it must be my sister's soul that has saved me once again. As long as I am still alive, I will always be able to feel her aura, and that star called sister will never fall. This time, I sincerely wanted to live well. One day, a long time later, I dreamed again of that kidnapped night, dreaming of my sister falling in a pool of blood, looking at me with tears in her eyes, her lips opening and closing. "Sister, what did you want to say to me in the last moment of your life?" I guess it must not have been resentment or blame.